Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on public.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special Women in Motorsports program. Joe Samniego here, along with Ben Schneider and Daniel Seri from Racers, the girls behind the helmet. Good morning, evening, or late evening, wherever you're watching around the world. Encourage everyone to be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network right here. We're getting close to $450 subscribers, but definitely would love to get to $450 if you could join our Patreon, invest in the Grid Network, help us stay on the air as we preview all the weekend shows right here. And of course, this weekend, we got some races to discuss. We got some big news to discuss later in the program about Formula One and the potential of another all-female series. But we'll start off with Daniel. A big historic moment last race weekend at Portimao, Portugal, European Le Mans Series, and the Iron Dames are doing it again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. As you mentioned, it was another big weekend for Iron Dames. It's really been a remarkable season for the all-female team that is competing in all the major sports car championships around the world. So WEC, European Le Mans Series, and GT World Challenge for them this year, and Ferrari Challenge as well. And they've already wrapped up the championship in Ferrari Challenge with Dorian Penn just a week before. And then another remarkable weekend for them in Portimao for the final round of the European Le Mans Series. This year they've been really close to that first victory in both in the ELMS and in the World Endurance Championship, but that really something they were just missing something towards the end, possibly in the strategy, also in bad luck most of the times. And this weekend, finally, it was the moment to shine for Iron Dames. Sarah Bovey again did the pole position on Saturday. It was the first ever female pole position in European Le Mans Series. They've been really close prior to the final round in Portimao, but they were mostly in second position or in third position for throughout the championship, but never that pole position. And Sarah finally did it in Portimao, which is a very technical track. Also for the Ferrari, it was quite a tricky track because, of course, the Porsche and the Aston Martin have been really fast throughout the season. Mega job by Sarah to score pole position on Saturday, and then in the race was really challenging because just before the start of the race there was rain coming, so there was no rain at all in practice and in qualifying, so the cars were on track for the very first time in rain as the race started. So there were also some cars spinning in the formation lap. Tire gamble because they didn't know what to tire strategy go on. But the Iron Dames again Sarah Bowie did the first stint and she was really cautious. So she started and didn't take too many risks because of course they are also mixing the GT cars were mixing with the LMP3 cars as often is the case in the European Le Mans Series. So she really took a cautious approach. And she was down to P3 in the very first laps. But again, with their pace, she managed to quickly recover those positions and hand over the car to Dorian Fan in the second stint again in first place. And Dorian had one of the most impressive stints that I've ever seen in GTE championships. She was, of course, there was mixed conditions because again it started to rain and then it stopped very soon after. So it was again a really tricky situation for Dorian, and we have to remember that this was like second race in the GTE car. But she was really, it was crazy how fast she was in those conditions. She was on the intermediate tires. Some of the cars were on slick, some were intermediate, some were on wet. So it was kind of a difficult situation also to understand for the other competitors. But at one point she was like 8 seconds faster per lap, and she managed to put a full lap in between the first and the second place. So that was nothing short of impressive. And when she then handed over to Michelle Gatting for the final part of the race, they had quite a significant gap to the second place car. Even though they did manage to, Michelle had a really strong pace again. And towards the end, at one point, it was kind of difficult because they opted to pit Michelle for new slick tires towards the end, but she had kind of a safe gap to do so, and crossed the finish line in first place for the historic first victory for a female crew in the European Le Mans Series, because of course they had managed to get podiums, especially in 2019 and then in 2020, but then in 2021 and 2022 it was kind of a more difficult season for Iron Dames. They had their first podiums in Spa-Francorchamps at the previous round, but then finally the victory that they were so close to so many times arrived, and they once again made history. So I think they're showing this year in all the championships they've done. They've been so close, obviously, to the GT World Challenge title in the Gold Cup just a couple of weeks before. And they're really carrying momentum into the final race in World Endurance Championship in Bahrain later this year. And of course, we know that there have been some changes in the driver categorizations from the FIA. Michelle Gatting becoming a gold rated driver, and also Sarah Bovey becoming a silver rated driver from bronze. There will probably be some changes in the driver lineup, which is kind of a shame because now they've been really close as a team. They're really being fast as a trio. So we will see what the future holds for Iron Dames with the new categorization. We've seen also that they've tested in the days after the race, and there was Christina Nielsen testing for them, who is of course a bronze rated driver. So possibly some lineup changes, but we will try to keep an eye on this evolving situation and report from it in the coming weeks.
Definitely something we'll be following and reporting on. And of course, definitely encourage everyone to visit Behind the Helmet, the website as well. Comment in the chat room from Demas. Do you like GT racing Indianapolis 8 hours? We seen quite a few female racers in the Indianapolis 8 hours. I recall Samantha Tan was there. What were some of the other drivers you recall in that race, Daniel?
Well, we had Taylor Hagler and Erin Vogel teaming up together in an Acura NSX GT3, but also we had another female duo. Christina Nielsen was one of them with Ashton Harrison, and Ashton in that race won the championship in the Pro-Am class. So it was another pretty big weekend for female drivers in Indianapolis.
Very big weekend, and of course, definitely encourage everyone in the chat room. Comment, good to see you in the chat room as always, Demas. And when it comes to continuing the historic weekend, we had some of that right here in the United States at Las Vegas, but not the 1.5 mile speedway, the Bull Ring.
We did, Joe. Thank you guys for having me as always. I've got to say, now I know what Josh feels like on the Encore shows every Monday night. It's Tuesday morning for him. It's just after midnight for me here on the East Coast, Saturday early in the morning for me, but I'm glad we were still able to get this done. I know Daniel was busy this morning or this afternoon for him, I guess. It's early in the morning over there, Joe. It's not that late for you out on the West Coast. Yeah, we're all able to make it work, and that's the beauty of the age that we live in now, where we're able to meet up over these computer screens and still be able to talk some racing no matter what time of day all around the world. Speaking of the historic moment, Joe, like you were mentioning, of course, the historic starts of the weekend started at the Bull Ring at Las Vegas Motor Speedway on Friday. And as Daniel mentioned on last week's show, potentially, as far as we know, a worldwide first on a professional level. Sarah and Bridget Burgess became the first mother and daughter to race against each other in the same event. Now, last Friday, Bridget qualified 21st. She ended up completing all 158 laps of the race, finishing in a strong 12th place, just missing out on another top 10. And she's now 5 points away from Takuma Koga, sixth in the point standings for the ARCA Menards Series West. She's 42 back from Joey Easton, fifth, to give you all a reference point on where she is relative to the top five. Of course, pretty much mathematically eliminated from a top five finish in the point standings, but with the expected car count that we get at Phoenix every year, it could be an interesting battle for six between her and Koga going into the final race. We'll get into that in a little bit here in this segment. Now, of course, Sarah was making her West Series debut. She started at the back end of the grid in P26, driving the team's second car of a 97 Chevrolet with sponsorship from eBay Motors. Now, despite a couple of spins, she still was able to finish the race in one piece in 17th place, completing 153 of the 158 laps, after which both her and Bridget embraced and celebrated that tremendous accomplishment. Now, also in the race was Amber Slagle. She qualified 13th, ended up finishing a disappointing 20th, only completing 129 laps. She did have some trouble with her radiator, but they were able to get back and finish the race. And finally, making her ARCA Menards Series West debut, as well as Sarah Burgess, was Katie Hettinger, a young 15-year-old who was in the North Wilkesboro Cars Tour race a little bit earlier, a couple of months ago with Dale Earnhardt Jr. She was making her debut. She qualified very well, up in the top 10, up in 9th place. But unfortunately, her night ended early after the first restart on lap 15. Contact got Katie spun around, and Chris Loudon was unable to avoid Katie, crashed into her head on. Very reminiscent, actually, of what happened between Loudon and Bridget Burgess in the race before at Roseville. Ended up taking both of them out as well. So a disappointing end for Katie's race after such a strong qualifying effort. But again, hopefully this is just the beginning of her, and we'll see her a little bit later in 2023 and beyond, somewhere in ARCA. Now, for the West Series, the next race is the season finale, like I mentioned, at Phoenix Raceway, the Desert Diamond Casino West Valley 100 on November 4th, part of NASCAR's championship weekend. Jake Drew has locked up the championship, so it will not be nearly as dramatic of a finish as it was last year after Jesse Love won the championship on a tiebreaker pass on the final lap, very reminiscent of the 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix in Formula One. So not too much to look forward to on that front this year with Jake Drew clinching the title already. But again, with a larger car count expected, still expect a lot of storylines to come out of that race. Of course, Bridget will be back there as well. Sarah will return to her usual role as her crew chief when it comes time for that race in just a couple of weeks.
Very exciting stuff seeing that over in the Bull Ring. Meanwhile, the following day at the 1.5 mile oval, NASCAR Xfinity Series had their race, and one of the big names we saw making their debut, Hailie Deegan. Same weekend as we had the historic weekend for the Bridget Burgess and Sarah Burgess family, Hailie Deegan making her debut in the pristine auction Ford owned by Bobby Dodd, number 07. Overall, looked pretty fast when it came to the practice session. One of the big goals she had being the top 15. Well, qualifying didn't exactly go her way, 20th. So that meant if she wanted to get to 15th, she's going to have to make some progress, get up the field, and making her first start, considering most of these drivers have done the entire season, or if they're racing part-time, have done several races, and she's making her first start. What an impressive debut, you got to say. Ran a smart race overall, stayed out of trouble, and came home in 13th place. So she really exceeded when it came to trying to be in the top 15. Got a couple more extra stars, be up there. And one of the big things, Ben, you talked about on Grid Encore, was how with the Xfinity Series, a lot of folks see that as the natural progression after the Truck Series. Truck Series, not exactly having the success. And one of the things I found interesting, Hailie was saying how with the Truck Series, it seems like you're committed to a lane when you're taking the corner, where here it feels like you can drive around a little bit more here and there. We know potentially she's going to be going to Xfinity Series in 2023. We're awaiting an official announcement. We know we've heard some people talk about drivers being rushed from Xfinity Series to the Cup Series. Many have been discussing about that occurring with Ty Dillon before Kurt Busch's injury. If Deegan is confirmed to the Xfinity Series in 2023, are we talking 2, 3, or even 4 years like Noah Gragson, or just depend on how she adapts to the car and how she performs?
Yeah, you're talking Ty Gibbs, right? I thought I heard Ty Dillon there, but I think you mean Ty Gibbs, of course. Yeah, with Gibbs and Toyota, obviously. Joe, first of all, let me just give all credit in the world to Hailie Deegan. She had a goal she set out for, and she accomplished it, and she did much better than I was anticipating based on how her last couple of truck seasons have gone. Jumping into a completely different vehicle to finish 13th is absolutely a successful weekend for her in her Xfinity Series debut. And again, I know it's a very small sample size, but I think she has a major reason to be encouraged. And hopefully this will lead to something for her in 2023. I think it could be good for her, even though it looks like she might be taking a step up before she's ready. We've seen with Ty Gibbs, we've seen with other drivers in the past, the Truck Series has not always been a necessary step on that development ladder. So again, I think Deegan might be one of those drivers that just, for whatever reason, adapts better to the Xfinity Series cars over the trucks, and it could lead to some good things for her in 2023 and beyond. Now, in terms of how long it would take her to get to the Cup Series, I think we have to, again, keep our expectations in check. There's no guarantee that she's going to get to the Cup Series at all. I mean, if you look at somebody like a Brandon Jones, for example, who's going into whatever it is, his 7th or 8th season in the Xfinity Series now, he's driven for Childress, he's driven for Gibbs, next year he'll be driving for Junior Motorsports, has kind of, turned into this Xfinity lifer. He might get a Cup opportunity a little bit down the road, but he's not seen as one of the top prospects. He's had a modest amount of success here and there, but again, it all depends on how she's able to adapt, how she's able to run. If she goes out and has a massive successful season like Ty Gibbs has, you might be seeing some Cup teams knocking on her door as early as 2024, 2025. But again, I think a more likely scenario for her is she's going to run a couple of seasons, get used to the car, hopefully have some success, and that could lead, I think, probably on the back end of what you asked in your question here, maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the road, we'll see. I know Deegan's theme all throughout her rise through the ranks here, even going back to her K&M West days, has been she doesn't want to rush her development. I honestly would have liked to have maybe seen her give ARCA another year, the main ARCA Menards Series, before she moved up to the trucks. Of course, it's real easy to look back at that in hindsight. But again, like I was saying, I think she just might be a driver that's better suited for the cars for whatever reason. It just suits her driving style a little bit better. Again, very small sample size, but I think Hailie Deegan probably has a good plan lined up for 2023. I'm sure Ford have a plan for her, especially after the strong run that she had. She did an absolutely phenomenal, great job at Las Vegas this past weekend. And I think some good things could be coming her way in 2023.
And of course, Hailie Deegan, back to the trucks. One of the things, the Xfinity Series, they're racing this weekend at Homestead, and we're seeing the return of Julia Landauer. She's making her second start, well, attempting to. Car count shows 40, 38 is going to make the field. Then overall,
she's in, Joe. She's in.
She's in?
She qualified, yep. She made the field.
Wonderful. Shows how I don't exactly follow Xfinity Series too much.
It's a late night for all of us. I like I was saying, it's been a long day for everybody.
Long day, but one of the big things, she's in the field overall. But when it comes to Homestead, Miami, we know the Magic Mile, New Hampshire, her first debut race didn't exactly go that well. Here, Homestead, we got progressive banking, different lines. Do you think this is going to be something that's going to better suit her style when it comes to driving?
Well, again, I think, what happened to her at New Hampshire was pretty unfortunate, but I think Julia's had some strong runs in the past. And, again, very small sample size, only going off of one race here. But I'm certainly keeping my eye on her. I think Tommy Joe Martin's Alpha Prime team have certainly punched above their weight multiple times this year. And I have no doubt that given the right circumstances, Julia is going to be able to do the same in that car.
Gotcha. And Daniel, when it comes to Julia, of course, she raced over in Europe. Seeing her progression here in the United States, is there any of the experience you see from Europe that's starting to sort of stand out that potentially could aid her in the second Xfinity Series start?
Well, she was racing mainly road courses here in Europe. So, but I do believe that she's shown with she's qualifying 2 times out of 2 in Xfinity. So I think that also shows that she kind of has the pace, as Ben mentioned, to kind of outpace her equipment. And I think We haven't seen much from her in the first race, so hopefully she can log laps and have some mileage and build some experience for a future. What she will do probably next year. I know she is trying to build a bit of a schedule for next year, not like just a couple of appearances like this year. So I think having a strong run here this weekend is definitely going to help in this program.
Definitely looking to help out with her program. I think it's going to be really exciting to see how she does at the Xfinity race this weekend at Homestead, Miami. Now, of course, while NASCAR, they're in Miami, Formula One, they're in Texas, Circuits of America for the United States Grand Prix. But we heard some big news this morning where if we weren't on the air on our normal time, we probably wouldn't have been able to report on it. But one of the big things, potentially another new all-female series. Several media outlets have reported that Formula One is working on creating an all-female series in their feeder system with a clear path to Formula 3, Formula 2, and potentially Formula 1. This comes about a week after W Series announced that 2022 season had concluded 3 races early, working to salvage something for 2023. And this weekend, of course, would have been the W Series American round here at Circus of America. Daniel, Ben, is F1 jumping in too early? And does this move make sense?
I believe that's a good question. I believe that there's been some criticism also from Lewis Hamilton. We've seen yesterday on his social media profiles, criticizing F1 for not stepping in and helping financially W Series at least to get to the end of the season. I think Formula One has seen a lot of criticism in the last week after the W Series announcement. This does come a little bit as a surprise, but if they, now in retrospect, it's not much of a surprise because there were probably some commercial rights issues that F1, it would be probably easier for them to create from scratch a new series than to step in with W Series. But let me say, this is still early to really understand what this proposed new series will be, because of course one of the main thing that we're trying to learn is that potentially the new series is going to be a traditional team-based scenario with the same teams from Formula 2 and Formula 3 lining up cars in this new potential series. So the main thing that we have to understand is this something going to be like W Series that gives female drivers the opportunity to race for no budget, or are the female drivers mainly put in this category mainly just for this show, just for for the TV coverage and the platform that F1 offers, but they will basically have to pay for their own seats like they would in mixed series. So I think this is the main point here, because W Series had this, as I mentioned multiple times on this episodes, on this show, in my opinion, the most important revolutionary feature of W Series was the fact that they were selecting drivers and they were racing for free, not that it was an all-female championship, because that that wouldn't make much sense in my opinion right now with the information that we have right now, to see a traditional series but just for female drivers when they will have to pay for their seats fully like they are doing for example in Formula Regional or in Formula 4 championship. So I think this is the main thing that we have to understand now, and simply there has not been that many information yet.
Well, I'll certainly defer to you, Daniel, since you're much more in the know when it comes to W Series and everything. But the first thing I thought of was actually a story that Gene Haas told when he was trying to come into Formula One, in a conversation that he was having with Bernie Ecclestone. And Bernie said, well, why don't you just buy a team? And Gene ends up creating Haas F1 team essentially from scratch. I know they got a lot of help from Ferrari and Dallara, but it's very funny to look back in hindsight about how Haas's first year was Manor's last, and maybe Gene was having some second thoughts that, maybe Bernie was onto something when it comes to, the situation that Marisha were going through, and ultimately rebranding as Manor, and the fact that that team was, struggling to stay in the black for more than a year, so to speak, and then ended up folding entirely at the end of the 2016 season. Maybe it would have made more sense for Gene to just intervene there and kind of save that team and rebrand it as his own rather than starting from scratch. That's kind of what I see here. The W Series is obviously in financial trouble. Wouldn't it make more sense for an entity like Formula One, despite the fact that they're worth billions upon billions of dollars, and, to borrow a phrase that I recently rediscovered from Kyle Petty this week, have more money than God, so to speak? Why would they not just go ahead and purchase the W Series and save it from its financial woes, rather than going through the whole logistical process of starting a new series up themselves? That is kind of puzzling to me, but I suppose there might be some reasons at a deeper level, Daniel, like you were mentioning, that might lead them to go down that path. But at the same time, and again, I know we'll get into this in the next question here, but I struggle to see how, both of these series would be able to coexist next year. So obviously it's very early. There's still a lot that would need to be ironed out before this even so much as goes ahead. We're just getting the initial reports today or yesterday, depending on where we are in the world here. But I think there's a lot to still, take in here. But on a surface level, I have my doubts, and I have a lot of confusion as to, what F1 would be trying to accomplish here, going down their own path rather than just trying to align with the W Series, as it looked like they might have been doing at the start of this year, but clearly not to the point where they're willing to step in and save it now that it needs to be saved and will not be saved as the season's been canceled.
Yeah, one of the big things, now that we know the W Series, they are working on hopefully coming back in 2023. Reports are saying if they come back in 2023, they could run alongside with this new series that F1 is looking at potentially having next year. Several sources are saying that the W Series and the new series coming in, besides the difference of, as you mentioned, Daniel, the potential of the traditional team structure, the new series will try to aim at drivers younger, so in their teens really. Some of the drivers in the W Series might be a little older than what the new series is looking for. And the new series, about 15 to 12 entries, where we see quite a bit more in the W Series. Starting with you, Ben, could this work out if we had two all-female series, essentially with the same goal, try to elevate female racers up to a higher level?
Joe, I mean, I just don't see how that's a good idea, based on what has happened to the W Series this year. And again, I know Formula One could maybe provide a little bit more support if they were doing their own series here. But, if there's, if W Series is struggling enough as it is with no competition, and then Formula One decide, okay, we're going to start up our own series alongside, even though it would still, be a competing series in many respects, alongside the W Series, it's kind of, unprecedented to me. The only comparison that I could think, if you had to make a stretch, is, there were two IndyCar series from 1996 to 2008, and look at how well that worked for American open wheel racing. The IndyCar is still trying to get to the point that it was in the 90s before the split. It, in many ways, damaged the sport beyond repair in the minds of a lot of people. Now, again, I know that this is not an apples to apples comparison here, but I just think anytime you try to have two competing existing series doing the same thing at the same level, it most of the time throughout sporting history has not worked well. I mean, there have been so many, if you want to make a more American example here, to a stick and ball sport, which I know we usually try to avoid, but, there have been so many attempts like the XFL or the AAF to start up a spring football league to compete alongside the NFL when there's downtime. And it's hard for people to get drawn into that because the NFL is so dominant already. Again, not necessarily an apples to apples comparison here, but I'm just trying to think of any other instances where there have been two competing series in the same sport, or two series that are trying to do the same thing in the same sport. I just don't know, especially given how W Series had a hard enough time existing on its own, that it would be able to exist alongside Formula W or whatever Formula One is planning here in the works. I think if F1 ultimately decides to go ahead and do this, it's probably the final nail in the coffin for W Series, unfortunately.
Yeah, I will have to agree with you, Ben. You said a very specific thing. You saying competing on the same level. I think this is quite crucial because we have to understand if they will be competing on the same level. Because now W Series positions itself in a Formula 3 regional level. Because of course we had like a glass ceiling for female drivers into Formula 3 level before, with just a couple of them trying to make into the main Formula 3 championship. And then they position themselves at that level. But if what we're hearing about the drivers, that they will aim for younger drivers potentially, I think that now the level should be at Formula 4 level, because otherwise we simply don't have enough female talents ready for Formula 3 right now. So I believe if that is correct, if they're going for drivers much younger than the drivers that have been racing W Series so far, that should be taken at a Formula 4 level. If this is the case, then if W Series can find the financial resources to go on into next year, well, first of all, I don't think that they will be in the Formula 1 calendar, because they will have to kind of scale back in order to have a more sustainable calendar for them. But if that is the case, and they still managed to get the funding to promote drivers free of charge with their selection-based program, there will still be a kind of a mission for W Series, but I think they will have to change their plans and to maybe try to focus more on drivers. Like we have some of them in 2019 when the W Series started, with Alice Powell, for example, Emma Kemmerline and Vicky Piria, all drivers that were racing before that W Series. But they didn't have they had to stop racing for financial reasons for some years. So that could kind of be the new goal for the new mission for W Series. Trying to help female drivers not on the Formula 1 path, but on the many more paths that motor racing has to offer, like sports car racing, like prototypes. I think that could be still the only way that I can see these two championships living together at some point. But don't know if it makes sense, but we are still trying to get the information out. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
And you both bring up great points, particularly the open wheel split in the United States. Fans were divided because you had what many saw as the big stars of the Indy 500 unable to race in the Indy 500, as you had the new Indy Racing League starting up. You potentially, as Daniel had mentioned too, you might have a situation where this new series could be going towards Formula 1 through F3, F2, the FIA ladder system. Maybe the W Series pivot towards different route, like you mentioned, sports car, or as we're seeing, Jamie Chadwick tested an Indy Lights car at Indianapolis, potential route to IndyCar and maybe the Indy 500. So this sort of makes me think the two series will potentially see over 20 female racers, different routes, different plans. But then I have to start thinking when it comes to, besides Formula 1, the W Series, we're seeing more female racers. We can see that there's an interest in having more females in professional racing. Starting with you, Dan, do you think maybe we could see something like IndyCar or NASCAR looking to emulating a step for all female racers to then hopefully get that extra step up to a higher position in racing?
That's a great question, and I mean, IndyCar and NASCAR so far have tried to avoid having a completely separate series for female drivers. They tried to facilitate their entries with some specific programs, but not by having a fully female championships running alongside them. And so that could still work. I don't see specifically on the IndyCar ladder an all-female championship being run there. But also we are now, I mean, I want to reiterate on this. So far, we don't have that much of a big pool of female talents ready to get into big single seaters. I mean, we are talking of like 20 drivers potentially in all over the world. So how is this gonna work for multiple championship run in all over the world? I'm saying this because I'm monitoring, the drivers coming at Formula 4 levels in the US, in Europe, and there's not that many. We are seeing a lot of new female drivers in karting level, but still it's early. It's still early to because otherwise you are risking to just for the headlines to bring them in Formula cars, but still they're not ready, and then we are talking about a lot of difference in track time with their male counterparts, and that is the most important topic right now, to try to get them as much track time as possible compared to some of the top drivers in the top teams that do make into the bigger championship. So I don't know, I think that there's too many things on the table, but we are missing kind of the big point, that is give them the opportunity to run as much track time as the drivers that in big series, in big teams that are then ready to step up to the bigger championship.
Well, I agree with Daniel's concern about there being enough drivers to merit an entire series there. I can't speak as well on the NASCAR side of thing. I can speak to what's happened in the West Series a little bit, of course. I think probably the better direction to go would maybe be another team like a Rev Racing, or a team that the sole purpose is to try to get more diversity in the sport, or more female drivers, more women opportunities. I'm thinking of a couple of names like Gracie Trotter, for example. She emulated Hailie Deegan by winning a West Series race in 2020. She got a part-time deal with Venturini Motorsports in 2021 and ran fairly well there as well. But again, we haven't seen her all season because it's been difficult for her to take that next step because of the funding issue. If Gracie had an opportunity to race for a team like that, it would be better. If nothing, it would allow her to still be racing on that stage on that same level. And maybe if she continued to have that success, some funding would come her way, would give her a better chance of moving up. But I think that's ultimately probably what the next step should be. If you wanted to go the way of having like a W NASCAR, for example, or an all-female series for the IndyCar series, I would worry that you might be moving closer to some of the concerns that people like Pippa Mann had when the W Series was announced. And that, motorsports, the beauty of racing is that this is one of the few sports in the world where men and women and people of all different backgrounds can truly compete against each other on an equal playing field, because the car doesn't know your gender. When you put on that helmet, like you say, Daniel, the car can't tell the difference. Men and women can compete against each other, and it's great for the W Series to be giving women these opportunities. It would be great if NASCAR or IndyCar could find a similar direction to go. I don't know that there would, like I said, be enough for a full series yet. But again, I worry that if another all-female series starts popping up here and there, it might kind of reinforce that idea that maybe that would be the way to go, instead of trying to get women into NASCAR period, or IndyCar, or Formula One, which is the ultimate goal eventually. I would just be hesitant to go down that path of starting up a whole nother W Series for a different discipline or something. But again, my bigger concern here is is there enough interest? I think back to the inaugural year W Series was announced. If I recall correctly, Natalie Decker and Tony Breidinger were, one of the original, or two of the original candidates, despite the fact that most of their experience was here in, completely different machinery. It was a very foreign concept to them. Now, they did, I think, about as well as we expected them to. Unfortunately, didn't get the opportunity to race in the inaugural season, but they came back here and are now on, the stock car paths that they've been on their entire careers. I think it would have made more sense for them to be in a similar program on the stock car side of things, or a NASCAR/ARCA side of things. But again, I think that's where a team concept comes in, rather than trying to emulate the W Series and, do another all-female series. I just don't see, for a number of reasons, that being a valid option at this point. But I do think there are things NASCAR can look at doing that would give some of these drivers additional opportunities, particularly if funding is an issue, but they've proven their talent elsewhere.
Great points by both of you. And of course, we'll be following this story and all the stories right here on the Grid Network. And of course, any updates definitely will be reporting it on Grid tonight. And definitely, Dan, something else you'd like to add when it comes to before we go to the next bit?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with what Ben just said, and I think also Iron Dames, the success of Iron Dames now have showed that that you can really do a program like this, but still competing at the same level with with all the other drivers and in mixed series championships. And now we are seeing here a lot more teams starting programs like inspired by the Iron Dames. For example, we have Kelly Moss Racing in the Porsche Carrera Cup US. They are doing it later this month, a selection test to have their first female driver there. We have in the GT4 French series, there's just been a selection program this week at Circuit Paul Ricard Le Castellet with 6 female drivers. 2 will be promoted to our all-female team in GT4. And we are seeing more and more programs like this inspired by Iron Dame success. So I think this is much more the path that the championships and the teams will have to go down to, and not what Ben just mentioned. Completely segregate, in like Pickman said, for example.
Definitely one of the big things, as you both said, comes to motorsports. The car can't tell who's behind the wheel. That's one of the beautiful parts of it. Always question, how do we get more females, diversity in there? I definitely think it's something where we're going to be following, and I agree with you all that these series should be launching pads. The teams, what they're doing with the Iron Dames, that has been working out. Hopefully we can see some more of that as well too. Just finding that balance going forward. Now, Dan, I know when it comes to the weekend, you have a lot of races to follow. It's hard to balance all your time. Can you tell us some of the races you're going to be following this weekend?
Well, this weekend I'm in Mugello for the Italian Formula 4 final race of the season. We have, of course, Maya Veog and Victoria Blocchina racing in Italian Formula 4, and obviously this is also to continue our topic. Maya Veog was selected with the FIA Girls on Track program. She was brought into the Ferrari Driver Academy, and she is receiving a lot of good support from Iron Leagues, Iron Dames racing in Italian Formula 4, the highest level of Formula 4 in the world. With good amount of testing days and track time, and she's doing really well. So I think this is another example of what we were just saying. Also, there's Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine racing here for the final round of the season. We have Amna Alkbasi racing here in place of her sister Amda, because of course she had some commitments in a university. So her sister Amna is racing here. Of course, Amna was out of the car for like 8 months, so she's trying to get back into the rhythm. But she's making some good progress. And also we have Italian GT Championship final race also of the Sprint Series with Vicky Piria, former W Series driver, here racing. But also we will see also some GT racing in Spain with Nerea Marti. Racing in the Spanish Endurance Championship with BMW Spain, also driver that we've seen in W Series, and in the United States we are seeing, of course, the Xfinity race and the track race. Pretty another busy weekend for all around the world.
Daniel, I just wanted to bounce off of one point here on the previous subject. Was watching FP1 today in Austin, and Logan Sargent was driving for Williams, became the first American to take part in a Formula One session since 2015. And I was reminded of something else that happened in 2015 with Williams, and that was Susie Wolf, who's the last woman to take part in an FP1 or an official Formula One session. And that was not that long ago. I think a lot of newer fans here in the United States in particular have picked up Formula One the last few years. It was not that long ago, but Susie was really on the brink of a Formula One drive. So it's not impossible at all. It's certainly something that we could see going forward. And I think, again, W Series was a little bit controversial in that regard, but if we can find a way to give women these opportunities, it is absolutely possible for women to compete alongside the men on the top stage, even as high as Formula One. And I hope we see it one day, because I think we're closer than a lot of people think. They just need that opportunity.
And of course, we encourage everyone be sure to visit the website racersbehindthehelmet.com. There you can get all the stories, including Bridget and Sarah Burgess making history, Aaron Vogel, Michelle Holder, who's been competing all throughout the year. Haven't talked about her too much. And of course, the Iron Danes, Iron Links. And once again, racersbehindthehelmet.com. Definitely check it out, the website. And of course, we encourage everyone to be sure to subscribe to us right here on the Grid Network. Hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our on-air programs. Big thank you to our Patreon, Con the Show, Mark and Robin, for keeping us on the air. They invest on the Grid Network through Patreon monthly contribution. You can do that, or a one-time contribution through Buy Me a Coffee. And you can also follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So definitely check out all those pages, and especially if you're looking for something in motorsports journalism, the LinkedIn page has opportunities there. And of course, public.com has opportunities for you to learn about investing in the stock market. Use the referral code GRIDnet, start investing in the stock market. Use the tools there, daily podcast, meet new friends, find your current friends that are already investing using public.com. And once again, a big thank you to Ben and Daniel for being on the air at this time, and for everyone tuning in. Grid Live pre-race going to be coming up later today or tomorrow, depending on what time zone, but Saturday, noon Eastern at the usual time, and then Sunday, approximately 90 minutes following the conclusion of the NASCAR Cup Series race, Grid Live wrap-up, and then Grid Encore with Ben and Brandon Monday nights. So don't miss out right here on the Grid Network. For Daniel Zera Races, the girls behind the helmet, and Ben Schneider, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful race weekend. Enjoy all the races. Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com.